This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is going to be a different type of episode today. As I record it, I still don't know if I'm going to mark it as episode 48 or a bonus episode or some combination of the two, because I'm still relatively new to this process. I am coming up onto nearly 1 year's worth of episodes as we are approaching episode 50, which will come out around the 1 year mark, as episode 1 was the beginning of October 2018. And the reason this is going to be a different episode is I have no guest on this episode today due to some scheduling and the fact that recently on one of my favorite podcasts, Making Sense with Sam Harris, I noticed that although normally he has an extended conversation with a guest on each episode, he had one where he just covered some topics on his own, and I thought I kind of have a place for that for myself. And because I'm new to this, and because I'm still learning and trying to do better, sometimes I don't really know what is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, when in reality I should know that there is no right or wrong. This is my podcast. I can do whatever I want with it. The caveat being, you, the listener, I want to make sure I understand what it is you like about it so far and continue to provide that. The problem is, outside of the occasional piece of feedback giving me precise reasons for what someone likes or perhaps what someone doesn't like, I really don't know what will lead someone to listen to this show or whatever other show that you might, but I can only draw from what leads me to listen to the different podcasts I listen to. And in the ones where there are extended conversations, like I have on People I Know Show, it's the type of guests that the host has on, but also the host. And knowing the host and feeling like I do know the host more and more by just listening and really getting a sense of who that person is and recognizing ways that I relate to that person or things that I like about that person. And then I keep listening. And in the cases where the host kind of annoys me or I don't really connect with what they're seeming to try to accomplish, I suppose that's the point where I move on. But that's everyone's opportunity with this show or any other show, and I want to keep on providing what I think is useful content, interesting people, conversations that I am happy to have that I can only imagine can connect with others. So a few thoughts today, and then I'll get into something that I've been thinking I would have shared by now on this podcast, but it hasn't really come up, and I haven't made a point of having it come up, so I thought, how about I do that in this episode today? So a few things. Coming up on episode 50, I did make a minimum goal. Like when I started this, if I'm going to start a podcast, if I'm going to enter this venture, the bare minimum for me to make sure that it wasn't some sort of failure in my mind is I thought I have to make it a year. I'm going to make it a year, and then as I approach a year, I'll decide if it's worth continuing. And we're getting pretty close to the year, as I mentioned, and I will continue. I think for a few reasons. One is I haven't accomplished what I've set out to accomplish yet, in part because there are skills that I'm learning by creating these episodes and trying to manage social media accounts and getting the word out more for more people to listen. There's skills within that I need to continue to build. I want to continue to build. How can I do this better? How can I reach more people? How can I be more effective at all these things? And sadly, I feel at times like I'm not doing a very good job of it. And maybe I am not doing a good job, and that's the proper thought to have on that. Or maybe I'm doing a better job than I realize. But I don't think I'm doing good enough. So to stop now would be ending what I've started with the podcast, but also it would keep me from learning these new skills and building on the skills that I have learned. And I imagine for you out there with whatever you've tried to create and maybe are creating right now, that's a part of the process that maybe when you set out to do something, you don't realize exactly how hard it is or the things that you need to learn. And this has been that for me. If I ever want to have this entrepreneurial mindset, which I think I have, but to do well at, whether it's this podcast, a different podcast, several podcasts at once, or something entirely different, there's skills that go with it that, unfortunately, if they're being trained now in some sort of formal education system, I'm not and haven't been a part of that for a while. And I think there's just a lot of skills in life that you never would learn in a classroom type of setting. You just need to learn them by doing them. So I am going to push beyond episode 50, well beyond. I haven't picked a number. I don't know if there needs to be a number, but I know there's a lot of work to do. And there are some things coming up that I'll get into in future episodes that I think are going to train me to be more effective at this when talking with the guests. If you've been listening for a while, you know that influence has been a big thing. At some point, I recognized that when having a guest on, although I know all kinds of people and I find everyone that I have on this show interesting, one of the more important things I try to focus on when possible is bringing people onto the show that have influenced my thinking or my actions. And there's a lot of people that have done that, some in small ways, some in huge ways, but having a conversation about how someone has influenced me is the point of People I Know show. It's to share how the variety of people in my life, and any other person could probably do this exact same show with them being the host and then bringing on the people that influence them and the people in their life that are interesting. I'm sure a lot of people could put together a show that would be worth following and listening to. And I just happen to be doing it with my life. It's sort of a biography of my life in sorts, not in any biographical order, just pieces of my life pulled together week by week, finding the people, some of the people, and eventually as many people as possible that have impacted me in different ways, with the thought that if they can impact me, if their thinking has brought on a new line of thinking for myself, perhaps it'll do that for you. So I've been doing that, and there's a lot of people that have influenced me, and there's plenty more I can and will have on, and will continue to do that. But at a certain point, I realize there's more. There's more to make an impact in this type of medium. There's more than just provoking thought by having people that have had a different type of action or a different type of thinking. I realized, and it's come out in a few episodes, but I think mostly in the most recent episode 47 with my cousin Barbara Lee, is that there are things that, as I would have conversations with a few of my guests previously, I would be hesitant to talk about, as maybe hesitant to ask them about, because I don't know that they want to talk about it. And I see that as a problem, that in the modern world, and perhaps for as long as history goes, I have no idea what people used to do with things that they thought were kind of private or personal. But I think in the modern world especially, we need to become more and more comfortable, and maybe it's never comfortable, but more and more willing to talk about the things that we don't really tell anybody, the things that maybe a couple people close to us know. Because, and I find from my life, I'm going to share a story from my life, that I found that by sharing the story, sharing the struggle, sharing the thing that I've dealt with and have continued to deal with, it gets better. It simply gets better. And I can't say with certainty that talking about every possible thing would make someone's situation better. Perhaps there are things that it's best not to talk about. I can't say with certainty. We'd have to take it a case-by-case basis. But I'm willing to argue, and I'm willing to push the emphasis of this show in some episodes and as many episodes as possible to putting myself and finding guests that are willing to be vulnerable, that are willing to talk about the things that are impacting their life, but for the most part, live only inside of their own mind. To have a better life, the things that are impacting our lives greatly need to be discussed. We need to be more okay with the fact that we're human and we deal with stuff that is embarrassing or shameful or traumatic, but we're human, and maybe not everyone has to deal with all this stuff, but I think I'm finding it's pretty damn common that almost everybody, if not everybody, is dealing with some stuff. And even if you think what you're dealing with and what someone else is dealing with are drastically different, based on my perception of my life and just observing throughout my life, no matter what your struggle is, if it's small or if it's maybe in comparison huge, like drastic, major, it's still your greatest struggle. Whatever your greatest struggle is your greatest struggle by definition. And I just imagine there's people on this planet and throughout history that have lived in so much worse places and times than so many of us get to live in. If you're listening where I'm recording in the United States of America in 2019, this is still one of the best, if not the best, places and times on this planet to have lived throughout history. At least in some arguments. There might be an argument that because of the way things are going and because of the way technology and money and all this stuff consumes our lives, maybe it's not the best, I suppose. But in terms of opportunities to be healthy and to live a life where you can connect with people and just have these moments of joy that seem to be so widely available for so many of us, if we can just get our minds in the right place, we have everything we need. And if you don't have it yet, the skills that you need to build in order to get more of what you need are there for you, it seems. Of course, I'm talking in generalities, and not everyone's life is within those same generalities, but it seems to be there for us here in this country in so many places, whereas there's people modern day, 2019, other parts of the world where their struggle is so much different than ours. Our daily struggle, their weekly struggle, their yearly struggle, so much different. And it just is because they happen to have been born in a time and a place where the struggle is drastically different than it is somewhere else in the world. And I'd imagine they're so consumed with what they're dealing with, no matter how difficult it is or how maybe not, or maybe for us, like here, it's not as difficult. No matter how difficult our most difficult thing is, we all deal with it as best we can. And sometimes it totally consumes us and knocks us out. But either you don't survive and that's it, but if you do survive, you continue to deal with it and try to make your life circumstance better. And that's just me kind of trying to wrap that thought out into words and put it to you. And I don't know if I did the best job possible, but just recognize that we're all dealing with something, several things. And like at this point in time, I feel like I don't have that many bad things to deal with. I don't know how it compares. Like my greatest struggles, they seem okay. My greatest joys, although, same type of thing as I've talked about the way my emotions work, my greatest joys are kind of rare too. I don't feel joy all the time. I feel like I'm living a pretty good life to the point where I can take the time out of my life and give up some income probably, actually quite a bit of income probably, with the ways that I could be making money right now to do this podcast, knowing that I might not ever make a dime from it directly or indirectly. It's possible, but I still think it's worth it to try something, to do something, to try to take some of the deep thoughts and ideas that I have and just put it to work. I wasn't necessarily ready to start. I just eventually started, could have started sooner, glad I started when I did. And now that I've started and gained momentum and gotten better at something, I want to keep pushing through. And going back to vulnerability, as I suggest that, knowing that you out there listening, you're dealing with something. I don't know how drastic it is, how major it is, how many things you're dealing with, but you're dealing with it. And just first off, think to yourself, are you talking to anybody about it? Do you have people you can turn to be vulnerable with, to tell them what you're struggling with? Are there things in your mind that live only there? That whether it's fear or discomfort or shame, something that's keeping you from talking about it, and it lives in your mind and it influences the way that you live your life, but it stays there. Is it only in your mind? Do you share it with some people? And as I'm going to demonstrate here in a few moments, and as the most recent episode with Barbara kind of showed, is there may be an opportunity, whether it's on this podcast, People I Know show, or somewhere else. What if you talked about the thing that you've struggled with that makes your life seemingly more difficult than you wish it would? That's the challenge. That's the question I have for you right here, right now. And that leads me into this story from my life. And it goes back to maybe 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I don't know when it started for sure. And I'm not convinced I know the reason it started. But I will share it here. And we'll see, maybe it helps someone listening right now, soon after the episode comes out. But then I had a thought, by searching for some keywords, I don't know that there's been a lot of podcasts about this topic, even though I did a Google search and it affects like 15 or 20 million Americans. So the term is shy bladder syndrome, also more medically accurately known as paruresis. And it's simply the social anxiety where someone is unable to urinate, to go pee, to use the public bathroom like it's designed, like pretty much everyone around them seems to be. And I first began to deal with that sometime in my early adolescent years. I don't even know exactly when. The reason why I think, and it may totally be wrong, is I remember going in for like my 7th grade physical examination. And it was a time in my life where I remember so often when I'd leave home with my mom or my family and I wouldn't go to the bathroom before I left. And on this day I thought, oh, I better go to the bathroom before we leave. Like this is what I'm supposed to do. As kids sometimes don't always pay attention to this. And maybe I was 4th grade, 7th grade, whatever the grade was. So I went. And then we show up to the physical, probably 15 minutes later, not too far away. And one of the first things they asked me to do was give a urine sample as one of the tests for this physical. And I wasn't able to go because I had just went. And I can't say for certain that this caused it, but I remember that being kind of traumatic. I remember being in the bathroom crying because they wanted me to do this and I couldn't go. And I don't know for sure if in that case I would have been able to go under a more comfortable circumstance or not, or I just simply could not pee because there was no pee to pee. But that one, I do sync that up in my memory with some of the things that transpired after that, where, like any seemingly normal person, I would have to do a number one, and I would go into the public bathroom, like in the locker room or somewhere like that, and I would stand there knowing that I felt like I had to go and nothing would come out. And it was so confusing when it first started happening. It just didn't, I couldn't comprehend why I had to go and I was standing there like I used to, but nothing would come out. It was like something was blocking it. And as I went on to learn, I haven't studied this closely, and I've never been officially diagnosed with this, but certainly that's what I was dealing with, and based on what I've read. that somehow in my brain, similar to how perhaps a 1 or 2 or 3-year-old might wet the bed, and then as you're being potty trained, you learn where it's okay to go to the bathroom and where it's not okay. Somehow, for most people, I think, as adults, as teenagers, you don't wet the bed because your brain and your mind and your body has learned where it's okay to go and where it's not okay to go. I don't expect anyone to take this challenge, but you can if you want. If you wanted to go into your bed, lie down, and try to wet the bed, I'll argue the side that you would not be able to. Your body knows, nope, not going to go here. Not everyone's body works the same, but that's based on my understanding of this. You know where it's the right place to go, and you know where it's not the right place to go. Well, somehow, my brain and body had learned that it's not right to go. It's not okay to go in a public bathroom, which I could talk about this for a long time, give a lot of examples, but I guess the reason I'm sharing this story is, boy, I wished for I don't know if it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, however long I dealt with this in my own mind. It was a long time where this is so embarrassing and shameful. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. I just tried to deal with it. If somehow some information had gotten to me, then to help me more quickly, that would have been amazing. The thing that began to help me, finally I did some research on it and bought a book, and at the end of the book or somewhere in the book it told me I need to tell my family. I didn't know that it was okay to tell something so private and shameful to my family or to anyone. That wasn't something I'd ever considered. Maybe that was a part of my upbringing, or I think it's just general human shame to not want to talk about things that you're just so greatly embarrassed about. So at a certain point there, that was like a big breakthrough where I had everyone in my family. I called like a family meeting, which we really didn't do, but I called one to tell them about this. And everyone reacted differently, and people had questions, and some had experienced something similar in some small situations that I think can happen to some people sometimes. The problem for me was it was happening every time. And I would avoid going to public restrooms whenever possible. I would drink less. I would go into the stall. Like for men, you can stand up at a urinal, and that didn't work for me for many, many years. Now things are a lot better now, and in most cases, it's perfectly fine. But there's still situations, like, I don't know that if women know this, but in especially older American venues, stadiums, and I think this exists elsewhere in the world commonly, there's like a trough situation where you stand side by side, you whip it out, and you just are expected to pee. And most guys, I think, are able to. I think some probably slightly less comfortable, but still able to. Me, not able to. Just not. Not an option. Couldn't do it. Still probably wouldn't try. It's not so much of a thing that I want to even try to do, because I just know what the result's going to be. So I find another way to go about it. And again, it's gotten a lot better. It's something I'm still dealing with. Like, it doesn't completely go away, but with more confidence in myself, I suppose, in certain ways, and just the fact that I've told more and more people over the years, like if I'm out with someone new that doesn't know me, and I need to go back into the bathroom a second time or a few minutes later because I couldn't go, I tell them, and then hopefully I go, and it's not a big deal. But the idea of talking to someone about it initially, so frightening. Like, I can't tell someone about this thing. I'm such a weirdo. There's something wrong with me. That was kind of the thought process I lived with for a long time. So as I enter this portion, this phase of People I Know show, where I'm seeking out people that are willing to share something that they're vulnerable about, that would cause them to be vulnerable, I think it was pretty fair for me to share at least one story from my life about being vulnerable and struggling. So that's what that story is about, and there's probably a little bit more to that story, but something I'd realized is just interacting with the world and being in public bathrooms occasionally, whether it's at my workplace or elsewhere, I can notice at times people that have the type of behavior that resemble the behavior that I have, or especially used to have. And I don't know what to do about it. Like, I've noticed some people through my life, it's like this person's probably struggling with the same thing that I struggled with. I don't know that person very well. Do I just pull them aside and tell them what I've witnessed? Maybe I should. But I feel for someone that is dealing with that and hasn't overcome it. I started to overcome it in my 20s, and now I'm mid-30s, still dealing with it, not embarrassed by it anymore, just a part of the way that my wires got crossed in a sense, I suppose, and my body doesn't function the way the average person does. But I'm cool with it. I mean, I'm okay, and I've survived well, and I travel the world, and I go to the big stadiums and the concerts, and I find ways to make sure it's not a big deal. And for me now, it's not a big deal. But I do know there's people that it's a really huge deal. Like it's a reason that they don't go anywhere, like almost ever. And if in the days, weeks, months, or years, one of those people, you are one of those people that have found this episode from the early half of September 2019, reach out to me, find me. I will do whatever I can to be someone you can talk to, because I know it's hard when you're dealing with something that is embarrassing and you feel shame about. But know that I've been through it, and I don't want anyone that happens to be struggling with that to struggle as severely as they are right now. I cannot promise that it's going to go away. I never sought professional help. I was able to see continued improvement to the point where I never felt the need to seek it out, but I know there are ways to possibly get professional help to make that whole situation better. So that's my story. I thought it'd be more brief, but the story of shy bladder syndrome, Paruresis, and I think one of the first cases through nearly 50 episodes of People I Know show where I've been vulnerable. I don't feel vulnerable about it. Talking about it, to me, it's okay. I've told the story. I think one time a Toastmaster speech, I added it to the speech and told it in front of a room of like 12 or 13 people, and it wasn't something I was that comfortable with sharing, but I shared it. Although showing how my confidence has shifted a little bit. I had been posting those videos online to Facebook, my speech videos, but that one I decided I didn't want to put up there. Because of that, partially or mostly, it's still, it's something I had even some months ago when I recorded that, something I wasn't that comfortable with people knowing about in that way. But here, this is a revelation that I think we all need to find those things we're least wanting to talk about and begin to talk about them more with whoever we can or are willing to. But from that, share it on a broader scale, because we're all struggling with stuff. Every one of us has things we're dealing with that live in a portion of our mind where we feel like we can't let it escape to certain people. And that's troubling. That's not going to make the world a better place. We need to be okay when we're not okay. Be okay with not being okay, and find ways to share. So as we move forward with People I Know show, there's going to be a guest most of the time, all the time. But I suppose occasionally, when I have something that doesn't necessarily fit into an episode, I might do this in addition to a normal episode or just in place of one, like I'm doing for this Friday. Remember, you can always find People I Know show on any podcast app. I think it's on all of them. If somehow you come across a podcast app where People I Know show isn't, please tell me so I can make sure it gets added. But otherwise, the videos on YouTube, I would like to see more subscribers there. I want to get more and more feedback. And I'd like to hear your ideas on what more I can do with this show. There's things I've considered. Maybe I'll have two other people that I know, talking to each other. There's different ways that I might start doing that. I would like, if you have something to share, you are out here listening right now and you feel like there's something that you want to say to the world, I will be open to hearing what it is and finding a way to possibly have you on an episode or have it as a part of an episode where there's several of those things happening. It's a platform I'm building and trying to continue to build. I want to help people, and if not always helping people, just get people to think differently, because we need to consider different perspectives. We need to know what other people are dealing with, I find. And so because I find that we need to do that, I would like to encourage others to see it the same way that I do. I'm certainly not right about everything. That's like the whole point of this podcast. I wasn't always right. I'm still not right, but I'm trying to become more right more often. And I would like you to consider a similar approach. And if People I Know show enhances that approach, I'm pleased. Thank you. And I hope to keep on offering more of what I find interesting to be a part of your life. So thank you for listening to this different type of episode. All me, a Curt Carstensen monologue. Kind of different, kind of fun. And check back soon for the next episode of People I Know show. And always, besides Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which is all going to be linked in the show notes, Apple Podcasts, rate and review. I've heard subscribers, by subscribing to the podcast, it helps. So make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Ideally, write a review, rate it. Those things are good for me as well. But I just would like to see your emails. If this helps you in any way, please shoot an email to peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.